Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lady Trinette Wilson. I want to thank you for joining me for Royal, Black, and Elite. Today's lecture, we're going to discuss Stokely Carmichael. He was known as Kwame Ture, and he was a real big figure back during the Civil Rights Movement. Now, we know that right now, Juneteenth is coming up. That's really a Texas event. We know that it became a national holiday, but I thought it'd be great to have a civil rights movement kind of whole series, and we're going to kick it off with Kwame Ture. Now, he was born in Porto, Spain, Trinidad on June the 29th, 1941, and I think it's important to know him because when you see movements like Black Lives Matter and the whole Black Power movement, which he coined all those years ago, it is out of his movement and out of that movement, the Pan-Africanist movement, but it was a mix of these Pan-Africanists also had a mix of socialism, communism, a whole lot of stuff, radicalism. So it was all of that power, that fight that came out of that civil rights movement that Stokely Carmichael was very instrumental in. Now, when you think about Trinidad in 1941, it was an island that was greatly impacted by World War II, and there were a lot of naval bases being built there, and that impacted the residents who lived in Trinidad. So many of them began to move and migrate to America, and the Toure family was one such example of that. However, he had to stay behind for a while, so we'll talk about his childhood a little bit, but he was born Stokely Stanford Churchill Carmichael. And you hear people say that people who were in the islands, they really loved white people, the black people, even though they were being oppressed. And like I said, they were having bases built right on top of them. They really loved them. And so they named a child Churchill. So you'll see that in the islands. And that's why there's a kind of disconnect sometimes when you talk about Africans and people from the islands and American black people or FBAs or ADOS. It's because we were actually enslaved. Our ancestors were, whereas they were not. They came in and they built, huts for them, and so this is why you see this disconnect. And it's good to know so that as we talk about this man, you'll understand kind of where he's coming from. So when he moved to America, he actually was raised by his grandparents. So again, all these bases were being built in Trinidad. Black people were moving to America, but he had to stay behind. Now, he stayed behind because his parents moved and he was 2 years old. His father's name was Adolphus and his mother's name was Mabel. When he was 11, he then moved to New York with them, originally in Harlem, but then ended up in the East Bronx in a place called Van Nest. So that's where he grew up, which was really a racially mixed area, actually. And he, in an article, he said that he was the only black member of a gang. This article was in Life magazine called Morris Park Duke. And they did like little petty crimes and things. So he was a part of a gang. No, but no matter that, he was a really smart guy. And he actually graduated from the prestigious Bronx High School of Science in 1956. He went on to Howard after that, and that's where he really began his activism. Now, he had some very well-known professors there at Howard, and that really was ground zero of a lot of the activism that was getting ready to start happening around the country. And so one of his teachers was actually Toni Morrison. So he was in high cotton, as my mother would say. Now, Howard is, again, where his activism began, and he began to be a member of the Nonviolent Action Group, and this is called NAG. And this was a subsidiary of a larger group called the Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee, or the SNCC. And they had movements like CORE, which was really responsible for those freedom rides. And he actually participated in a freedom ride during his first year in college. So he was a very active in the black movement and civil rights. And he really wanted two things. As you see him grow in his movement and in his activism, there was two things that he really believed in. He believed in collectivism, the collective economy, and that's where you get the socialism and the communism stuff from. collective economy and black autonomy, meaning that black people could build their wealth separate from the dominant class system at the time, which were white people. And so he really railed with that, a lot. He wanted this collective wealth, and he thought nonviolence wasn't always the best way that he could do that. So initially, the nonviolent movement was getting some traction, but after the assassinations of two of our greatest leaders, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, Stokely was like, I'm over that. So he was talking real reckless and real radical, and the SNCC began to separate themselves from him, and he stopped being a member of them and he joined the Black Panther Party. He thought that would align more with what he believed in. However, that didn't work either. One real reason was because J. Edgar Hoover was really, I don't know if you know or not, but back in those days, the civil rights movement was infiltrated by the FBI. And J. Edgar Hoover would plant different people and different lies and different rumors and break these members up. And so he was kind of shunned by the Black Panther Party. So he had no home in the nonviolent movement, and he had no home in the Black Panther Party. So Stokely ended up moving to Guyana, Africa, and that's where he would spend the rest of his life. He married Miriam Makeba in 1968. They stayed married, however, to 1973 and were divorced. They never had any children. She was a famed South African singer. He then married some years later a lady named Marletu Berry, and she was a doctor. So he married well, but they divorced in 1981, and they had a son together. But from pretty much once he got into Africa and stayed, he pretty much was a writer. He toured internationally talking about what was wrong with America, but he never did come back, and he became a citizen of Africa, and he actually in 1969 changed his name from Stokely Carmichael to who we know today as Kwame Ture. Now in 1996, Ture was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He was kind of pretty much destitute by then. He really didn't have any money by then. That whole America's horrible story, for blacks really started falling in because the civil rights movement was in fact so successful. It really was, to me, a combination of the peaceful protests, the radicalization also, when things weren't right? So it was a combination of both. I don't see that combination in our discourse now. So the strides that those black civil rights leaders made, we are nowhere near that today. And it's because we keep looking back, to me, instead of looking forward, looking at and assessing where we are right now, what's needed to be in place right now, and how that collectivism can work right now. Too many of us, black people, we start businesses on our own and are not successful because there is no collectivism. But, that's my view. You tell me what you think down below. I think Carmichael had some ideas, and I think some of them were very important. And in fact, I'm going to leave you with his words and his really hope that he had in the black community. He passed at only 57 years old, you all, in 1998. Now, he always believed that the FBI infected him, but we don't know either way. I want to know what you think about Stokely Carmichael. Do you think some of his stuff, some of his beliefs were appropriate? And what do you think about him really being shunned by both the peace movement and the radical movement? He really was a man with a message without a home. He took it to Africa, but even there, it kind of fell flat. So please tell me what you think. He was, again, a mover in the civil rights movement. And this is part one of my civil rights movement series as we lead into Juneteenth. So I want to thank you all for joining me. You all don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe so you can hear about the royal, black, and elite stories that are not normally told in our black history. I want to thank you for joining me. And don't forget, y'all, they like us to hype now too. So hype. Remember, this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. You all have a great day and leave your comments down below.